myself. I'm Jody Clark, and I am the Industry Development Manager Team Leader at Sustainable Table. And I'll introduce my colleague Christy, who is coming back on screen now. And Christy is an Industry Development Manager as well at Sustainable Table. So the two of us have been listening and very much aware of what's been going on in the meat processing realm, and hearing from our other collaborators in the region, such as AFSA and Open Food Network and Sustain and many other amazing groups. So we're sort of here to try to feed some information through to industry and provide a support in that sense. And for those of you who have been following Sustainable Table for a while, we have traditionally been known most broadly for giving out grants to high impact projects. We are shifting that focus towards trying to look at how we can access alternative forms of funding for industry projects. And so perhaps that might be loans or impact investment. We're still feeling our way, but we've got some really exciting pilot projects happening at the moment, or happening next year, really, or early next year, that we can announce publicly. So if anyone is confused about what Sustainable Table is, I just wanted to give that little bit of framing that Christy and I, part of the industry development team, and there's a little bit of, we really rely on what we hear from industry in terms of taking that back to the team and understanding where the gaps are and what we should be filling. So obviously, AFSA, the Australian Food Sovereignty Alliance, is doing an incredible amount of work around the legislative advocacy to change the law for different states around on-farm meat processing. We've got an incredible petition we want to share with you at the end for anyone who hasn't seen that for Victoria. They also have their meat collectives webinars and support solidarity sessions, I should say, and they're doing amazing work, and we just thought we'll jump in and help facilitate this one, particularly around the Provenir model. So before we kick off, I wanted to acknowledge that I'm joining today on Wurundjeri land. I'm here in the Dandenong Ranges in Victoria, and the Wurundjeri people have had this land for over 60,000 years and have been stewards and custodians of this. And I recognise and acknowledge that their sovereignty has never been ceded and runs very deep. And I'd like to acknowledge their elders, past and present, and all of the elders past and present on all of the lands with which you join us across Australia today. Given that there are over 100, well, I haven't even counted, but lots of us here today, we're going to ask you to stay on mute for the duration of the webinar until we get to question time. On questions, we're going to hold questions. We're going to hear from Chris Balazs from Provenir, and he's going to run through his presentation. You can write your questions in the chat so that you don't lose them, but we do ask that we save the questions until the end of his session. And when we do have question time, we'll just use the put your hand up mechanism for if someone's speaking and you want to speak next. We also want to let you know that this meeting is being recorded, and we will send out the recording publicly afterwards. And so it's going to be roughly an hour for Chris to talk about Provenir. There'll be questions and answers session after that, and then we hope to have some to open it up more broadly pending time at the end. And we'll also be asking a poll later around what other topics might be relevant for you. We're not going to get to everything. This is a session mostly around the Provenir mobile model, but acknowledging that there are other solutions, such as your on-farm abattoirs, your local off-farm micro abattoirs, farmer-led collective models, etc. So we will get a chance to organise more of those, and we'd like to hear from you later about guiding us in the right direction. So finally, just noting that this is a very emotive issue, as we know, and we'll just ask that people can be respectful, acknowledging that there are so many of us and we just want to provide space to hear different voices. So we will be keeping an eye on just, ensuring that everything is nice and polite and respectful. And now I'm going to hand over to Justin Wolfgang. Justin is a Sustainable Table board member and an advisor based in Western Australia. And Justin's going to do a quick 5-minute framing of the issue and where we're at the moment. Thanks, Justin.
Thanks, Jodie, and nice to see so many people there. There's some familiar names popping up here in WA as well. The framing of this is knowledge that all of you, or a lot of you, would already have. For the purpose of saying this, it's really so that the broader industry and community actually understands it and we're all on the same page. For decades, graziers and pastoralists and anyone raising animals for meat production have seen the availability of options for processing decline. The small-scale abattoirs have exited the industry. A lot of it exited the industry, and large-scale operations is getting bigger. The offer of custom processing for individual farmers and producers from abattoirs has diminished over the years, and it's getting to a critical stage. And a lot of this is closing off around regions all around Australia. And here in Western Australia, with the distances between facilities, it becomes an ever-increasing animal husbandry issue. Now, with the red meat industry or the animal processing industry across Australia, a lot of these businesses have had to stabilise against the volatility in the industry, and the reasons for the volatility in the meat processing side over the years has been based on a range of factors, including international trade restrictions, labour shortages, government policy, and, well, in some cases, poorly informed political interventions, especially for the northern cattle sector. We had a pandemic for abattoirs managing throughput, a lack of stock supplied during drought, and then conversely followed by good seasons where producers prioritising, re-establishing stock numbers. And there's a whole lot of other reasons for what creates the volatility in the industry. Now, while some processors still offer the service of custom slaughtering, the decision for those to not do it is purely their own. They shouldn't be chastised for the rationale for doing it, because each business has to ensure their own financial sustainability. So the decline of available options for the producers has been like a super slow motion train wreck. It's been happening in front of everyone in the industry for ages, with regulators and peak bodies and producer groups, and particularly governments being asleep at the wheel. So, like all of us, we're all really busy doing what we must do and trying to prioritise addressing this issue or any issue. We don't really give it the time until we're affected by it, which really indicates the shame of the situation we're in, where we're all too busy to address every challenge we face in agriculture until we are either personally or financially affected, or both. I know a lot of producers who get the option of custom slaughtering. They also have a risk posed by speaking up. If you have a relationship with an abattoir, you're not prepared to jeopardise your spot for fear of being denied access. For a lot of producers, the risk of animals going missing or not taking delivery of carcasses which are clearly not theirs, or being penalised financially for supposed defects. For those of you who don't know, defects from a processing side of things, it's where meat's tainted or dark, or it's bruised, and a lot of the time that actually happens at the processor's end, not at the farm, not before the farm gate. So the biggest threat through all of this situation that we're in is actually the loss of control of the supply chain, and that control continuing to shift to the market end, who dictates what we we can or must do. So for most people, the option or the only option is to sell to the processor's buyer or agent and just be a price taker. So, but that's the negative side of it. Unfortunately, it's full of it. But on the positive side, a lot of people are taking control of the situation, and they develop their own direct supply agreements and arrange for local or on-farm small scale processing. And this represents the greatest opportunity for farmers and graziers. So many of them around Australia have personal supply agreements with the hospitality industry, or direct into families' homes. This side of the community and hospitality industry, they want to support the people, the stewards of land who are raising animals, and through that process can demonstrate landscape restoration and producing healthy, delicious food. So the problem with this is that the demand for the services for custom slaughtering greatly outstrips the supply of this service, and hence why we're here today to talk about this. So sustainable tables focus on food with sustainable tables focus on food system transformation. We're wanting to share stories and experiences and learnings from those within the meat processing industry who are actively taking on-farm or making the on-farm options available. And the primary purpose of this is to build the resilience in our farming communities. And as a result, it's a pleasure today to have Chris Balazs speaking with us and sharing his experience with 7 years of learning with Provenir. Sustainable Table is an independent supporter in this area, and by inviting guests to speak about their businesses, this is not a form of endorsement. It's a way of opening the dialogue to share people's actual experiences of what works and, more importantly, what doesn't. And we're aware that there's no single solution to this problem that we face in our community. It'll take a range of options to properly address the issue. So we hope that today's webinar will be the start of a series of discussions on this topic, and we'll rely on you, as Jody indicated, to give us some feedback on what you want to hear. We will ask everyone who participates to be respectful of others' views and opinions. But more importantly, this is probably one of the most important parts for me personally and others, is that it's a highly emotive issue. And if people are finding this difficult to the point of distress, that we really encourage you to speak with family and friends or others in your community. And by community, I don't just mean who's local to you. I mean this community of support is a nationwide group of people who are affected, just like you. And so we're here to help, and we're here to support. And if you need help connecting with anyone, please reach out, as it's in all our interests to support each other. So there is hope, there is direction, there is positivity, and there's great examples of what people can do. And today we're going to hear some information from Chris on this very subject, which is very exciting, and I'm happy to hear what he has to say. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Justin. So over to Chris without any further ado. And I just wanted to quickly jump in and say thanks everyone for throwing in a little intro in the chat. It's quite disconcerting to be speaking to a screen and not in front of a room full of people. We don't often do webinars, and so it just makes it nice and personable that we can see some conversation and some live action happening in the chat, as well as seeing some of your faces. All right, I'm going to mute and pass over to Chris.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for the introduction, acknowledgement to country. And yes, I'm going to be looking at my PowerPoint presentation for the next hour, but it was very nice to see everybody's faces at the start. And I do want to thank everybody for finding the time to join in this discussion. And I do see it as a discussion. There'll be a part where I'll do a presentation, talk about the journey that Provenir has had and I've had in doing on-farm processing. But the bit that I'm really looking forward to is the discussion that's going to happen after that from there. So I will share my screen now. Now, can someone nod and say that it looks all good? Great. So the presentation that I'm going to do today is a little bit of what Justin was saying. It's going to be a bit of an overview of where the industry is at the moment and some of the macroeconomic forces that has led to the situation that we're facing at the moment, which is a lack of contract kill space being available for people to produce or to process their own animals for retail sale. Just a quick short history of Provenir, and we've been only operating for 7 years, so it is a short history. The business was incorporated in 2017, and it took us around about 2 years to raise capital, build the unit, and we commenced operations in 2019. Interestingly, at the point when we actually started and got funding, the regulators in Victoria deemed that mobile processing was illegal. And we'd already been in the process of trying to lobby for that law to be changed, which we were successful in October 2020, which was quite fortunate because it took another about 6 months for the licensing process to occur, and the license was granted in Victoria in 2021, 2 weeks before the border to New South Wales closed. And at that stage, we were only licensed to process in New South Wales or slaughter in New South Wales, and actually we did the butchery back in Victoria. So that was quite fortunate, but it's a state-by-state analysis of mobile abattoirs and micro abattoirs about the regulatory side of things. I'll talk about that a little bit later, but we are currently licensed in Victoria and New South Wales, and hence we had the relatively dubious honour of being the most highly audited company in Australia with regards to meat processing, despite the fact that we were Australia's smallest. But that's some of the things that you just have to deal with as you start a sort of a new processing option in the Australian landscape. So currently we have one, we refer to it as an MPU, or mobile processing unit. Many of you would be familiar with the term MSU, mobile slaughter unit, which is used more broadly overseas. We decided to use MPU just because of some of the sensibilities in Australia with regards to the term slaughter. Over that time frame, we've processed on a total of 85 farms across Victoria and New South Wales. The total number of head we've processed is just in excess of 4,000. That's in the last 5 years. We're licensed solely for the species of cattle or bovine, whilst the design of the unit itself can do lamb, goat and beef. We've only stuck with beef just because our butchery capability is somewhat constrained, so we can only really deal with one species at this stage. We process around 18 to 20 head of cattle per week. They're in a sort of 550 to 750 live weight range. So we prefer to do definitely mature animals from there, and that translates to a carcass weight of around about 6 tonne per week is what we process through the MPU and our butchery. We've grown to having staff of around about 14 at the moment, and we'll talk a bit more about the staffing later on. But yeah, really without those staff, it just couldn't be possible to do it. And there is definitely a challenge in getting the right staff into the business. And I'll be talking a bit more about that afterwards. Just gonna remove that. And it really was from humble beginnings that we started Provenir. And the reason that I say that is hopefully it allows others to understand that they don't need to have backing of millions of dollars and, 1,000 head of cattle to actually start looking at this. We had 5 founders to start with. We literally had startup funds of $10,000 to start the business. And we had a grand total of 5 farms who are actually brave enough to allow mobile processing to happen on their farm. And I can tell you that each of those farmers had a lot of pushback for adopting something as ridiculous as mobile processing back then. So they're incredibly brave pioneers of the industry as well. And each of the 5 founders, we had pretty much zero industry experience coming into what we thought was a really good idea of taking processing to the point of production. But again, I say that to hopefully inspire people or maybe take away the fear that they haven't worked in an abattoir for 15 years. And I've always thought that true innovation, true disruption always comes from outside the industry with people who can see things differently. Oops. There we go. Just going to go through a bit of a overview of the industry with a couple of graphs here. And this is very much what Justin was talking about. So where we are currently at the moment, which is actually restricting the contract kill space, is the national herd is being rebuilt. This is not going to be a shock to anyone. We've got back up to around 30 million head of, and this is just cattle data. So for those who do, pigs or sheep or goat or so forth, it's a similar picture, but I've just used the data from cattle to prove the point. So there's a national herd rebuild that's happening, and you can see that the increase of the number of animals has been significant. Coupled with that Australia is the second largest exporter in the world. So we've built a lot of capability in our processing sector to be able to export the meat from our country overseas. And if you look to the third slide here, you can see the value of that export is around about $18 billion per year. And unfortunately, the picture is a little bit small, but the orange is actually representing the chilled and frozen meat that is exported off. So that means that those animals have been processed in Australia before they're being exported. The live export is actually really quite small. I think it's the blue slither on top. So the vast majority of what we export is processed in Australia. And then when you have a look at the processing sector from a turnover of that $18 billion, 32% of that is captured in the processing sector. So it's actually a really profitable part of the overall industry. So it's only beef cattle farming that has a higher percentage of the national turnover of the processing sector. In stark contrast to this high percentage, if we have a look at the number of businesses that operate in the industry, beef farming is the largest with 53,000 beef cattle farming operations, which many of you are operating listening to this tonight. But in the processing sector, there is only 657. Now, that's all types of processes, which I'll talk about. There's 2 types of processes. So when we talk about the slaughter or the abattoir sector, it's actually less than that. It's a bit over 300 abattoirs that operate in Australia. And a lot of them have been closed down, the small to medium-sized abattoirs, generally from financial or compliance reasons. And this has created a huge concentration in the overall supply chain in the processing sector. The final slide is highlighting something that you'd all be very aware of, is that 4 of the 7 largest processors are foreign owned. So I don't have any particular issue if a abattoir is Australian owned or foreign owned. But what it does highlight is that these foreign owned abattoirs, and they're very large scale, are focused on the export market. That's where they're actually seeing the value for their business is in that export market. And that's why these foreign companies have come into the second largest exporter of meat in the world to operate those processing sectors for the purpose of export. So when you take all of these things together, it comes up with a pretty simple equation. When there's high livestock supply, strong export capability, couple that with really strong export dollars, and that comes into foreign exchange and the value of the Aussie dollars, you multiply that by low competition in the processing sector with foreign ownership, these businesses are removing contract kill space because the economics of doing contract kill versus processing their own is a bit of a no-brainer for them, that they will make more money and their operations will operate more efficiently if they remove the contract kill space, which is the devastation that has happened for many of you who have really wonderful businesses that rely on that contract kill space. Now, the contract kill space may come back in the future. I personally can't see that happening anytime soon. I think groups like AFSA have done a wonderful job of petitioning those that are going to close. Hardwicks is the hot topic at the moment, and may be able to extend that contract kill space for a number of months, which is something that I strongly support and really hope that does happen. But I think long-term, this is a reality that we all have to actually accept and then start to think about, okay, so what's the other solutions that we can to continue our great businesses? I'm just going to go through a little bit of the red meat value chain. So many of you are obviously heavily in the production or farming sector and know that business very well. And many of you would have a lot of experience also in the retail or direct-to-consumer sector as well. But I wanted to highlight this because hopefully some of you are starting to think about, well, maybe I can take processing on myself or as a collective, or try to find a solution in that part of the value chain. So I've sort of broken it down to the key factors of labour per kilogram, financial risk, duration. So this is talking about the time that the product is actually in that part of the value chain. The target GMs, and this is very broad, so take it with a grain of salt, but these are the target GMs that each of the sectors are looking to get back in their value chain, and starts to explain why farmers are saying, why am I selling my cattle at $4.50 a kilo? And then I go into the butchers and I see I fill it at $100 a kilo. Someone's making an awful lot of money. So that starts to explain some of that. And then there's also the regulation or the compliance aspects that go through there. I won't talk too much about the farming because I'm pretty sure you're all very familiar with it. But when it comes to the processing, there's really 2 distinct sections that come into there. That's the slaughter, or what I refer to as the cow to carcass stage. And then there's the butchery stage, which is carcass to cut. So some businesses actually operate them as 2 completely different entities. Many of the large abattoirs actually combine the 2 in there, but I see them as 2 distinct processes in the value chain, and they have quite different aspects with regard to the factors that I was talking about there. So if we talk about the slaughter, the labour to kilogram of processing through there, it's around about a medium is what I'm saying is the number of head per the cattle that goes through per day isn't that high. And the financial risk is actually really quite low. So they take an animal and they have a carcass on the other side. The chance of product failure and the financial risk associated with that is relatively low from there. The duration is hours, so it's a really high-paced part of the business because they come in on one day and they're processed the next. So there's a really fast aspect which comes in there. The target GM's around 30%. And the regulation is high. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, but there's a lot of regulations, and so there should be with regards to the slaughter process. When we talk about the butchery side of that, the labour per kilogram is really high from that. It takes a lot of butchers to break down an animal, and then you have further processing, you need labour in there, you need packers, and then there's a high clean requirements of all the butcheries as well. So the labour is high and the financial risk is at its highest point in the value chain at the butchery point, because the possibility for wastage, yield loss, product contamination all goes up significantly at the butchery stage from there. And coupled with that is the duration is in days from there, from the time the carcass comes in to the time that the animal that the cuts need to go out is a matter of days from there. So the shorter the duration, the higher the risk as a general rule. And you'll also see that the target GM at the butchery stage is around about the highest at that point as well. So, and that's, you know, linked to the potential yield loss that occurs at the butchery phase, and also the high regulation that occurs in that phase as well. Then we go into sales and distribution. So what I've done in the value chain is the sort of large industry version of it. So there's probably not too much of us that work in the wholesale sector, which is basically taking the output from a butchery, storing it, and then selling it off into generally hospitality or other B2B channels from there. So I won't talk too much about that because I don't think it's that relevant for what we're interested in. And then there's the retail side of that. So this could be online, farmers markets, bricks and mortar. So however the end consumer actually takes the end product. So when we talk about the volume and the number of labour, it's relatively low. The financial risk at this point is really high because if the product isn't sold, the retailer is obviously the one that ends up with the write-off cost of that product not being sold and having to dispose of it. The duration with packaging these days is generally around weeks from there, and the target GM for most retailers is around 30 to 35% is what the meat industry works on. The regulation in that space as well is relatively low. There's obviously regulations in the sales of it, but the cost of compliance to that regulation is relatively low. So the next slide that I've got here is really if you're turning your mind to thinking about small to medium scale processing, what are the key things that you need to think about? So on the left-hand side are the things that I'd encourage everyone to start to have a think about these aspects. And then on the right is what Provenir has done when we've thought about those aspects around there. So scale of operation is really important to understand that. So what scale are you aiming to achieve from there? And the scale of operation is directly linked to the design of the processing unit that you'll end up with. So looking at the scale, and your scale might be small, so then you start to sit there and say, is there a collective model that we can get to that scale of operation? So for us, it's a minimum of 10 head of beef per week is the minimum scale that our operation was designed for. It actually goes up to around about 35 head per week. So times that by 3.5. So that's the scale that we've designed our business around. The other key part of it is if you've got a model that is going to retail or direct to consumer, you need to look at your supply of livestock for that. And that's a bit of a change for many farmers, probably not those that are listening because they do have a direct market channel, but looking at the supply of the livestock such that it can be supplied throughout the year. So obviously when you want your customers as well, you need to be able to continue processing to supply the customers to keep the customers coming back. Location of business is really important when looking at mobile processing or small scale processing from there. So, you know, how far away are you from the local towns? What's your sales and distribution going to be from if you're moving production, moving processing to the point of production? Who else in your location could potentially share the costs and share the opportunity of bringing this processing into your area? So we're obviously very focused on regional and rural. The furthest distance that we go to is we're based in Geelong, so in the southern part of Victoria, and we regularly travel to Albury, and we quite often travel up to Holbrook, which is about the maximum. So that's a travel distance of around about 480 to 520 kilometres. So that comes into the economics of, you know, fuel, labour, travel costs, all of those type of things. So the location of where you're going to have the business is really important. Marketing as well. So taking on processing, most people are looking to have a vertically integrated supply chain. So the marketing side of things is really important to work out where you're actually going to sell the product. And I kind of feel like I'm preaching to the converted here, but I needed to pop this in as well. So there's direct to consumer online, D2C, what I call F2F, or that could be farmers markets, bricks and mortar, butchers. So anywhere that you're engaging directly with the customer. And then of course, there's also B2B, which when you take on processing, because you're doing the whole animal, the B2B or to other food processors, pie manufacturers, hamburger joints, hospitality, whatever it is a really important part of balancing the supply offtake. So when we look at the sales side of things, we at Provenir, we've got a multi-sales channel approach. We don't like having eggs in one basket. So in retail, we sell online, which is our preferred option from there. We sell to independent grocers as well for the bricks and mortar as well. We sell to what we call B2B. So that's either restaurants, we sell to large pie manufacturers, hamburger joints, that aspect as well. Then we have the sort of what we'll get to is the bionutrient offtake. So we try to sell the hides. We get very little for it, and it's barely cost recovery, but it is another sales channel that we look to see how can we value add that. So in there comes bones as well from that. And the other one that we do is also we work with pet food manufacturers as well for the second grade trim, bones, and the other one that has popped up, which is really quite lucrative at the moment, is tallow. So we harvest a lot of suet and caul fat as well. And then we sell that as tallow through our supply chains as well. And that goes into either cooking or cosmetics as well. But anyone who's looking at this type of stuff definitely value the fat that comes off the animal, because it's really quite valuable at the moment. Looking at the regulations, for us and any business, you have to look across the food regulations. So that's, either, safe food, prime safe, whatever the food regulator is in the state from there. If you're looking at mobile, you need to comply with the road regulations as well, depending on the size of the unit that you build. For ours, it's oversized, so we have to meet the national heavy vehicle regulations as well, which is it's not particularly difficult, but it's just being aware that you need to comply with how the trucks are maintained, logbooks, so forth. There's EPA considerations, and if there's looking at a micro or on-farm abattoir, then there's planning considerations as well. So being across all those regulations, it's complex, but it is definitely doable, and we've proven that. When you come into the labour requirements, I've got another slide on that, so I won't spend too long on that. It's skilled labour that you need, but the real challenge for anyone bringing this on is getting the right cultural fit, and to respect the product that is being produced, because it's full of provenance. It's from animals that have been cared for dearly. And then, so having labour that actually can respect that is really important. Bionutrients, got another slide on that. So there's a couple of options: render, compost, biofertilization. And of course, the last one, which everybody asks me, is, what are the capital costs in there? So when you're considering it, there is a lot of number crunching that needs to go into there, a lot of assumptions about what finance are you going to do? What is a reasonable ROI that you're looking at it? What is the yield from there? There's a lot of finances that need to be considered in there. And by doing that, you actually really can create a very robust business model. Jumping over to bionutrient utilization, which is what I refer to it. Everyone else calls it waste. But I think most people on the call would recognize that this is inedible resource that can be utilized. It's not simple, but it absolutely can add value back into the farm from there. So the inedible output that you have is heads and hooves, hides, which in a good market can be sold. At the moment, they're actually worthless, but we supply to a local tannery, and we see it as a valuable way. Would rather someone get some use out of it rather than just burying it. Then there's the intestinal tract. Again, that can be valued through tripe as well, which is a highly sought after product in the pet food industry. And then there's the paunch, which is the grass content of the stomach as well. So they're the main inedible outputs. It's around about 35% of the live weight of the animal. So when you're doing your maths, 30 to 35% is a reasonable number to use for the inedible outputs. So when you look at utilization options, so the simplest and easiest is to use off-farm renderers. There's a number of large renderers around each state as well, and they'll gladly take it. You probably won't get any money for it because you'll be well below the threshold of volume in which they actually start to pay some small amount of money for. There is on-farm compost. There's a lot of data out there and guides on how to successfully do on-farm composting of biological waste. There's one that I'd love to do, we haven't done it yet, is a biodigester to accelerate the composting process. Some of our farmers have really well-developed worm farms that break down the waste very quickly, and they get the byproducts from the worm ingestation and put that back on their farm, which is a fantastic organic closed loop system. And then there's also the ability to make biofertilizers out of the paunch, which some of our farmers do as well, and they've had really good success with that as well. So when looking at the processing, always consider the bionutrients that you're not going to be using for human consumption, and look at how you can extract the best value. And that may not be monetarily, it might be as a really positive farm input with regards to fertilization and soil conditioning. Talking about the EPA, I could do another 2-hour session on the EPA, which I won't, but consideration around planning, amenity issues, water causes, soil type, volume of bionutrients is really important in those calculations, and the plan utilization strategy. So whenever either doing mobile or micro, consideration around the EPA requirements are essential, and there are thresholds with regards to EPA waste and what is required for licensing. So what we say is every circumstance is different, but it takes some time to actually look into there, understand what you can do without a license, and then if you get over the threshold, what you need to do with a license as well. Talking about skilled labour, if you're taking on processing and you're doing both of it, slaughter and butchery, listed there is the minimum requirements that you need. So AS 4696, which is the Australian standard for the production of meat for human consumption, mandates that a MSI must be on the floor at all times of operation. So no MSI, no license, no operation. So every operation must source a meat safety inspector. So that's mandatory. We've got 3 in our business to produce a bit of robustness. But there's also contract arrangements for meat safety inspectors to come out and do their job whilst it's operating. You'll need slaughts. So they're the ones that work on the slaughter floor. So I've got a little there. It's very small, but I know these slides are going out so people can refer to them afterwards. So these are the skill sets that the slaughts need to have. We also, you'll need butchers as well. And one of the really tricky parts is in the butchery is the first point that we've got there under the skill set is boning. Now, this is a skill that is in really high demand. It's very physical, the job. And it's probably one of the first things that if you're taking on processing that you want to consider is when you're looking at the skilled labour is getting someone who knows how to break down the animal, the boning. It's the one point where you'll minimise or maximise your yield loss. And it takes quite a skill to be able to do that as well. Obviously, taking on the business, then there's also supply chain that you're going to need to coordinate all the activities as well. So they're the minimum labour requirements. Some industry stats is that there's a total of 32,000 meat workers in Australia. 46% of them are employed by the 2 largest abattoirs. And most of the larger abattoirs anyone with over 50 staff have highly industrialized workplaces. So anyone who's been into a large abattoir has seen that the chain is moving and everybody has one job to do. So one of the challenges is if you secure people out of the larger abattoirs is to ensure that they are multi-skilled as well, that they don't know just one part of the business. So that's one of the challenges of the skilled labour requirements of taking on processing yourself. And from experience, I highly, highly recommend do reference checks on the staff because it's actually a really high turnover industry. And so making sure that you can get some reference checks of where they've worked before, that they're going to be the right cultural fit for your business is really important as well. But having said that, which sounds a bit demoralizing, like where am I going to get labour? We've found with on-farm processing, whether it's micro or mobile, one of the things that the guys who come out of the industrialized workplace really love is the work variety, is because all of our staff are multi-skilled. So everybody on the truck can pretty much do every job on that truck, which means that we've found that they're more engaged in the workplace because they're not just doing repetitious work all of the time. They're actually engaging in different jobs and developing different skills, which it comes under the skill development. For all of our staff, they all have truck licenses, which they were really excited about getting because it adds another ticket to their skill base and to their CV as well. So that was a benefit. And I put a quote in here, which one of our senior staff members said to me, and it was quite moving. She had spent, I think it was about 35 years in the industrial meatworks, and I think she'd be happy for me to say that she was kind of burnt out from that, and then she started working for us and has really loved it. And I asked her one time, I said, what do you love about the job? And she said she loved this job because she gets to see the sun. So many of the workers go into these large white buildings before the sun gets up and often after the sun gets down, and then just have a weekend where she was saying that she's outside, she's on the farm, she's engaging with farmers, and she really loves the work. So, building these kind of businesses can really attract people who really love and value the job as well, for all the added benefits, like just watching the sun come up in the morning. So looking at the small to medium scale processing models, there's a couple of design options from there. There's the micro abattoir, which obviously is a small scale static version of an abattoir. The one that I'm talking about, which is a mobile abattoir, and then what I've referred to is an on-farm abattoir. And there's a few of these popping up, which are actually, I would say, medium scale. They're designed to do, 60 to 100 head a week as well. They are on farm from there, and that's another model as well. So there's a micro, mobile, and then what I refer to as on farm, but it's sort of, medium scale on farm abattoir. The other thing to think about is the level of integration that you're going to do. So, maybe there's an opportunity to just do the slaughter and you have an arrangement with a boning room that can do the butchery side of things. So that could be a really efficient business model as well. So you don't have to take on both parts of the processing. It could be slaughter, or it could be slaughter and butchery. And then what we've done, which is a vertical integration, we've taken on all of the processing and the retail and sales and distribution as well. So when you're thinking about it, there's a number of levels of integration and there's a number of design options that you have as well. And then overlaid on that, is, what is the business model that you're looking at as well? So what we've done is an owner operator. So we purchase the animals off our farmer partners and we own the carcass all the way through. So that's what I refer to as an owner operator. But then there's also the collective or cooperative option, which can be really effective of combining resources to operate a unit yourselves, but doing it in a collective model such that everybody can benefit from access to the processing facility. And then a third one is the possibility of setting up purely a contract processor. So I'm going to set it up purely to service small or medium scale farmers to produce the meat for them to sell. So that's another business model that exists as well. Talking about, which is what I'm passionate about, mobile abattoirs, what the benefits are is, we like to think that there's a proven track record. We've been operating for 5 years. We've changed laws. We've operated on 85 farms. We feel that the proof of concept has been achieved. We think it's the highest animal welfare in the fact that the animals never have to be transported. So it's really taking processing to the point of production, wherever that production may be. So we think, that's the highest animal welfare that can be achieved in the processing sector. The other benefit is that there's no lairage requirements. So not everyone may be familiar with the term lairage. So lairage is at an abattoir, the yards in where the animals are held prior to processing. So under AS 4696, there's some quite tight regulations around how that lairage is to be constructed. And it's actually a really considerable portion of the overall construction of large static abattoirs. So as the regulations are defined, when a mobile processing unit goes to a farm, the farmyards are considered farmyards, and that there is no lairage requirements or nothing that falls under the regulations from there. So again, that's a cost saving, and it's also utilising assets that are already in place. We think it's the best biosecurity option as well, because the animals are never actually moving from one animal to, from one farm to another. So that's one of the key vectors that biosecurity is concerned about. We do a complete clean of the facility whenever we move off the farm. So everything is sanitized, bleached, clean, and so forth. So biosecurity have always been very happy with our operations and see that it is one of the best biosecurity options for processing animals. There's a decreased regulatory burden with getting licensed from there, partly because there aren't lairage requirements, there aren't planning law requirements in the 2 states that we operate in as well. So we saw that and took the advantage of forging a path through a lower regulatory burden pathway. We did have to change the laws to actually allow that easy pathway. So sort of yes and no. But yeah, so there's a lower regulatory burden. The other thing that I think is really worth considering is that a mobile asset isn't tied to land. And it's an easier asset to value and to insure than a static abattoir, whether that's micro or large. So also that I think works really well in a collective cooperative scenario as well, as the asset isn't tied to a particular individual's land as well. So if that individual decides that they want to sell the farm, move, not have that on their farm anymore, the asset can actually move to wherever it needs to be. And also there's a much easier resale value of the asset as well. So from that point of view, the asset valuation, financing and insurance is easier than a static one as well. They can be multi-species. We've got ours designed for 3 species. Really, there's no inhibitor for it being designed for any species of meat production. And it allows vertical integration as well. So what I was saying before, you might just want to have a mobile abattoir and integrate with a pre-existing butchery. Or you might want to do the whole lot. So I think it allows easier integration. It's easily scalable. Your production goes up, you just build another one and tap it into the system as well. Excuse me. And like micro abattoirs, it allows contract kill possibilities as well. So that's the same for that. So that's where we see the benefits of mobile abattoirs. Just wanted to go through some of my personal learnings, having gone through this for the last 7 years. And just, probably don't tie into a specific topic, but hopefully they're takeaways that you can take and think about. Small guys can win, which hopefully is a comment of hope, because I know many people are not feeling that at the moment, but small guys can win. It takes resolve, it takes resilience, and determination. But we like to think that, we're definitely small guys, I can tell you that. And we're on that path to winning. There is a scale of economy when you go through the process. Whether it's micro or mobile or on farm, there is a scale of economy that needs to be achieved for it to be able to function successfully from a labor and a financial and offtake perspective. That is different for every application. There isn't a standard scale of economy. It comes back into the next point that design dictates scale. So what you end up designing determines the scale, and then that has to be at a scale of financial return. Since we've been going, I've always suspected this, but just the feedback that we get, consumers care about provenance. We all produce a product that we know people value and want. So, that's a great thing. And consumers care about animal welfare. They really care to know where it comes from and how it's being cared for. And animal welfare is intrinsically linked to better meat quality. So our rate of dark cutters, I think over the 4,000, we've had 5 dark cutters out of 4,000. Industry rates are around about 2 to 3%. So, we're 0.000 something from there. And that's because it comes back to the animal welfare of not stressing the animal before processing. Bit of a tongue-in-cheek, meat workers are a breed of their own. They are interesting people to work with. They are soul of the earth, but they are different to farmers. I can tell you that. The regulatory landscape is complex, but it is navigable. The next one is a bit cryptic, but price elasticity matters. So the price variability on retail is really small. It probably varies 10 to 15% over, 18 months. Sale yard pricing varies by 20 to 30%, and that can happen, as you would all know, in the space of weeks. So as a processor, you're in the middle of that. So you really need to manage your costs very carefully, because the cost on one side varies dramatically to what you can sell it on the other. Every farm is different. So there is no such thing as a standard farm, whether it's the animals they produce, the people that work on there, or the yards that they have. So when you're building this into your plans, you need to know every farm that you're going to be working with or working on from there and bring that into the design because they're all different. And financial viability is not solely linked to the abattoir model. So I firmly believe that all models can be successful and all models can fail. It comes down to how well it's designed and how prepared you are with your business model. So to say that one model isn't financially viable, I personally do not believe from there. And then the last thing that I've had is nothing replaces actual experience. So if you can leverage experience, either your own or others that you can know, that is invaluable in the industry. So the last two slides are talking about where we are as a company and what we're looking to in the future. Our vision has always been to disrupt the meat industry for the better. The way that which is probably what many of you would share that vision as well. The way that we do it is processing at the point of production through mobile abattoirs from there. So we've operated the only commercial mobile abattoir for the last 5 years, and we don't want to be the only ones anymore. So we want to build more mobile units. We want to build them for ourselves and expand our network. And if we're going to go to that, we want to build them for clients as well. So the way that we look to do it is the first step, and this is optional, but we highly recommend it, is to go through a URS process or a user requirement specifications process, which goes into a deep dive that creates a business plan and the design elements that are going to work for your context. So this comes back to the previous point of every farm is different, every sales opportunity is different, every business model is different. So it goes through that process. And then we will look to build a turnkey solution. So a complete unit, whether that's the slaughter unit or the butchery. We're using our experience to establish food safety plans, guide through the licensure and recruitment process, provide our experience and guidance on the economics, on the pricing, on yield assumptions, all of those things that actually come in to build a business plan that's really built for success from there. So diving down into the first step is defining what the user requirement specifications are. So we actually do this for ourselves as well, and this is what we did at the start. So I've listed there all the things that we look to include in the scope. When we go through that process, we rely really heavily on the client to provide that information, and then we formulate it with our experience to have something that they can make an informed decision as to whether it's going to work for them or not, and how much risk is associated with proceeding further from that. So that's something that we do. We've got some information that anyone who's interested in, we can share with after that. I've got my contact details at the end of it. But that might be something that people may be considering at the moment. And it's something that would be very happy to help with. And the final slide here really comes to what Jody and Christy and Justin were talking about is we at Provenir really feel that, we don't have the solution for everybody. We have a solution that might be appropriate for some people, but we feel, I've come from, small scale, farmers markets. I started farming 20 years ago, so I don't come from a farm. I, had to learn all of the farming side of things and all the butchery and so forth from there. But we want to play our part and our role in helping this technology of small to medium scale processing emerge from there. So, industry concentration creates disruption. That's just a economic reality, and it doesn't matter whether it's meat processing or the taxi industry with Uber or whatever it is. Whenever there is high industry concentration of power and profits, that creates the basis for disruption to come through there. So that's what I believe we're seeing at the moment, and that's where I see the opportunity for disruption into the status quo. The time is now. The dominant players don't want change. The status quo works for them. So we're not expecting JBS to give us a grant or say, hey, this is a great technology, we want to see this happen. That's not going to happen. So, it's going to have to be us that actually do this and make the play. And that's why system change generally comes from outside the system. So it's not executives or highly experienced people who have been in large abattoirs go off and do this. It's generally sort of proud to say, but it's farmers' innovation. And when they're in a tough situation, they find a way to be able to solve the problem that they have. I think farmers are one of the most innovative groups of people. And what I've seen can be done with a piece of wire and hay band shows that innovation runs through farmers' veins. The point I was saying before, that there are many solutions to the problem. So what we've presented today is one of them. There's a number of different ways of it. So definitely don't think that that there is only one solution. Part of, I guess, it might be exciting to sit there and say, look, there's so many different things for me to think about in this space. How am I going to do that from there? And the reason why I did this is this webinar is because I believe that collective knowledge sharing is essential. And I've had multiple, probably hundreds of phone calls talking to many different people about what we're doing and how we do it. So when I was talking to Sustainable Table, I was like, well, let's see if we can hit the nail on the head and do a webinar and just open up the discussion and let everybody hear it at one and save me having another 200 phone calls. The last thing, and this is not mine, it's actually our COO, Tim Bennett's, who actually said this, is he really said that it's a bit of the Wright brothers analogy. So we've built, the first mobile abattoir. It really is a proof of concept. The way that we see it is it's like the first plane. And when they flew the first plane, everyone said, it's never going to replace trains. Cars are coming along. It's going to be redundant. It's not going to have any, wide viable use. It was about proving the concept and taking that first step of what could be. And that's what we sort of like to think that we have. When we build our next mobile unit, it is going to look very different to the one that we operate now, because we've got 7 years of learning that's going to go into that design. So really where we see it is this is an emerging technology or sector. And what we're doing is just the first steps, and others will take it and build on it and make it better and do things that we haven't even thought about. But yeah, where we see where we are at the moment is, the very first flight, we've just proven the concept. So a big
Chris.
thanks to the awesome humans at Sustainable Table for facilitating this. They've put a lot of work into it. So I just want to say thank you very much to you guys. Contact information is in there if you want to contact me afterwards. But yeah, let's have a chat.
Excellent. Thank you, Chris. And
Do I need to stop sharing now?
I actually jumped the gun and stopped
Okay,
sharing
great.
for you on your last slide. I'm sorry.
Okay,
So
great.
you want to share again, and we can just throw your last slide up there with contact details.
Oh, that's okay. Everyone's going to get a copy of it anyway. So
Yeah, everyone will get a
that's
copy. We'll also highlight your contact details in the email with
sure.
the follow-up email. So thank you
Yep.
for that. And I was trying to be too efficient. That was really wonderful, Chris. And we've still got 60 people here, and a couple of people who've had to go. Thanked you for your generosity and your time in doing this. I know you also said it will save you from hopefully 200 phone calls, but
I like this. I've got to admit, I'm a bit the same as you, Jody. Just talking ad nauseum to a screen is kind of weird. Like normally, I'm talking to people face to face. So, yeah, it was a bit unusual, I guess. But
you did very well, and you
hopefully it went okay.
kept to time as well, which has also made our lives a lot easier. Thank you. In interest of this having another 40 minutes to go, Christy and I was suggesting that we take a short 3-minute toilet break, and just to sort of, jump up and come back. We've got some great questions listed there in the chat. What I'm also going to do is pop the poll around future webinars that you're interested in hearing about with regards to slaughtering, but also if you've got other ideas. So I'm going to launch that poll and pop it here, and then we're going to come back at 7:54. Alrighty, and then we'll come to questions then. So just checking that this poll is working. Christy, can you give me a thumbs up if you can see that? Sweet. All right, and we'll be back in 5. Thank you. Thanks, Christy, for kicking up the recording again. I would have totally forgotten about that. So I'm going to close the poll now, and let's head over to questions for Chris. So thanks again, Chris, for that really informative presentation, and it was well beyond just relevant to the mobile abattoir context. There was a lot in there, and we've got a great set of questions. So to kick off, let's go with Cameron. So Cameron said you had capacity for beef, goat meat, and lamb. I'm wondering if you've looked at pig processing as well.
We have looked at it. It's not part of the design of our current unit as well. But we've spoken to Lauren Mathers up at Bundarra, just about some of the technical aspects of how it could be done, and we can't see that there would be any issue in doing it. And in some aspects, the design would be a little bit easier because you don't need to raise the roof to 7 meters.
True. Okay, thanks. Emma Kate would like to know how you've tapped into the B2B market, such as the hamburgers, the pie joints, etc.
That's probably one of the tougher parts of the total supply chain, particularly our preference is that we go for deep relationships. So a lot of the B2B businesses we've been supplying for years. Once the quality of the meat comes through and you get the pricing negotiations agreed upon, we just look to service those guys as well from there. But it's really needing to tap into businesses that can see the point of differentiation. And quite often, there's a lot of businesses in hospo and also food processors that are really keen about provenance. They want to tell the story of, where they source their meat from and why they put it in their pies and so forth from there. So we often cheat and do Google searches on, keywords like provenance and so forth in various sectors as well from there. So, and then we cold call them Sometimes we just get contacts as well. So I'd love to say there's a perfect recipe of getting them. We haven't found that yet.
Great. And John Stewart wanted to know, where did your meat safety inspector do their training?
Oh, that's a good question. There's a couple of I'm trying to remember the RSAs or RTAs, sorry.
If you like, Chris, maybe you can find that after and we can include it in our follow-up. If you can't,
Yep.
if it comes to you, shout out, but otherwise, yeah, not to put you on
Sorry, I
the
can't
spot.
remember off the top of my head.
No, that's fine. We had some interesting questions about meat safety inspectors for Tammy at Grounded in Tassie the other week. And yeah, she's trained as a meat safety inspector for her own on-farm abattoir, which is pretty cool. Okay, so Cameron again. Chris, what sorts of requirements are you looking for of your farmer suppliers? i.e., how do you become a supplier?
That's quite a process. So first of all, they've got to be on the regenerative farming journey. We have a number of farmers on various lengths along that journey from there, but we really look at their environmental credentials, on what they're doing on farm. We look at their animal welfare, with how they raise their animals as well. We need to look at their yards, that, you know, logistically, can we integrate with their cattle yards as well. They have to be grass-fed, grass-finished. That's absolute. So no grain or no additional feed additives from there. And we like really low chemical inputs to the animals. So we're happy with vaccination, but definitely no sort of antibiotics in feed, or, you know, prophylactic antibiotics or anything else like that. So from there, and then the next part is, what is their supply? So how many cattle are they turning off from there? So it's got to be a minimum of 20.
Great, thank you. Trev Peach says, for on-farm kills, is there a requirement for NLIS, National Livestock Identification System tags, to be used?
Absolutely. Yep. So we don't have any exemptions in our licensing from there. What we do have is exclusions, because in particular, lairage doesn't actually exist in our model. So we're not exempt from it. It just doesn't apply because it doesn't exist in our model. But everything else, we have to meet every other requirement from there.
Right. Callum, as part of biosecurity cleaning, are you cleaning the truck tires undercarriage to avoid soil-borne risks?
No, we don't do that. We spoke to biosecurity, who did raise that, and our comment on that was, we'll do that when every live transport truck has to do that after they get off every farm, and then go to the sale yard and clean it again from there. So they have to clean out the carriage, and often they will clean, you know, we clean the outside of the truck, but it is not a requirement to do so.
Fair point. Yep. Charlotte Whitelaw has asked, is Provenir planning on expanding into other states besides Victoria and New South Wales?
Our chair has been pushing for 5 years for us to move into Queensland from there. So yeah, we don't put a barrier on any state to move into. We've looked closely at the regulatory space in Queensland, and we don't see that there's any barrier there. And from what we understand in WA, that should be relatively straightforward as well. So that would probably be the next two that we would expand into.
Okay, thanks. Jenny Staker has said she is a farmer near Bunbury in Western Australia and looking to get on board with like-minded people. She has a fortnightly contract of sheep, so that's more a comment to everybody and yourself, Chris. Deanne Belfield, thanks, Chris, for your time. Well, sorry, that was more of a thank you. I should get better at this. Beck and Martin have said they'd love to hear more about contract killing and how far away you are from offering this. And would Provenir be interested in doing contract killing and butchering for our direct-to-consumer regenerative beef company?
The first one would be where are they located? And at the moment, we don't have capacity in our business to take on contract kill as well. So it's a capacity issue that we have rather than any philosophical not wanting to do it.
Yep. They're in South Gippsland, Chris.
Okay. Yep.
Yep. All right. Comment from Emma Kate, we're all building the plane as we're flying it in food systems change game. Yes.
Yeah,
that's
totally agree. Yep.
making it up. This is our first webinar at ST, so we can attest to that.
Okay, so the Wright brothers analogy is holding true on that bit as well.
There you go. You can tell you're a COO that for sure. And Jennifer Robinson from Sprout Tasmania. Chris, she would love to know whether you think, well, yeah, this is relevant to the other question, whether you think a mobile contract kill business model would work financially, as I understand that this was the original Provenir model prior to investment, but that the owner-operator model was one that made sense. So keen to know if you think in a different context this could stack up.
The business model was never around contract kill. It wasn't built that right from the get-go. Whether it could operate or not, I haven't done the numbers, so it comes back to the cost of the actual slaughter labor and so forth, and recovering that, and that being viable for farmers. What I could see, particularly because the gross margin required in a slaughter only model, that farmers took on the butchery aspect as well under a contract arrangement, I could see that could definitely work. Partly because, or mainly because, it's the length of time that the product is with the processor. So if it's just in the slaughter period, you could come in a day, process, give to the farmer's butchery to hang, and then process it. But if you take into the butchery, you need to hang it for really 5 days. So you need to have a very large butchery to be able to do that, and then a lot of labor to do the breakdown as well. So a slaughter only contract process, I think, could work quite effectively.
Excellent. Thank you. Luke has said, thank you. I'm a butcher, boner, and A-grade slaught. Currently, I'm doing on-farm processing. My experience is that some of the innovation needed is sitting with old butchers who have run a shop and a small abattoir. Do you agree?
100%, Luke. Yeah, if you're looking for a job, send through your resume. Absolutely. So, you know, I've learned so much from what they call the old school slaughts, or the old school butchers, when it was done a very different way and a lot more hands-on, which is what our process is as well. It's not a particularly industrialized process, and 100% agree with Luke. It's the old school guys that have got the knowledge and the skills, and we've just got to get them to hand it on before they hang up the hook.
It's pretty graphic, but it's probably true.
That's true.
Emma Kate has asked, are there labour issues with expansion plans?
Yeah, look, labour absolutely is a challenge. You know, there's a number of options as well. There's some highly skilled foreign labour that can be brought over, Filipinos or in the Pacific Islands as well, that have come over as well. So there is skilled labour that exists. It just depends on what model you're looking at and how big you're getting. What I would say is that there are a lot of old school butchers that exist in rural and regional Australia that used to work at a lot of the abattoirs that got closed down, 20 years ago and so forth. And whilst they may not be ready to jump back on the tools, they've got a lot of knowledge and skill, and they can be wonderful parts of the team to train others that are keen to learn the skills. But yes, labour, 32,000 meat workers in Australia, with 46% done, employed with 2 companies. That's actually part of what is driving the closure of contract kills as well, is that abattoirs have an increased capacity of what they can do. They're just finding it very hard to get skilled labour.
It's interesting. Question about minimum head numbers and movement restrictions that apply. What minimum head numbers and movement restrictions apply?
So we do in a week 18 to 20 head of the animals, and the vast majority of the farms that we work with have breeding and fattening operations, so they're vertically integrated on that. So the vast majority of the animals that we have never been off farm from there. So if they have been moved, we like them to be, because some farms have multiple farms, but we will process on one farm, so they'll move them from one farm to another. So they need to have been there for, we like months, but if it's under pressures of environmental conditions and so forth, it's 2 weeks. And the key thing that we want is we don't want the mobs to be commingled. So that creates more stress as they are hierarchical animals, and they're sorting out who's who in the zoo. So we say don't mix them with other herds, just the ones that are going to process, keep them separate, and they've already got their social structure sorted out.
Great, thank you. And Chris, I don't know if you've mentioned you might stay on farm for a few days with the crew whilst you're processing for a particular farm. You might.
Yeah, so our preference is that we'll go to a farm possibly for 4-5 weeks. We'll only process for 2 days each week, because that actually the slaughter process is a lot faster than the butchery process. So the team can generally get that number done in sort of a day and a half. But then we'll leave the truck there and then come back the next week and process again.
Yep. So putting the animals that have been slaughtered into the refrigerated vehicle that pulls up alongside the Provenir mobile unit, and then take that, empty it, come back.
Yep, that's it.
Greg and Lisa Mum have said, we are trialing retired dairy cows, but assume their height and size might make mobile processing difficult. Would on-farm processing make more sense? Is there a saving from building on-farm processing versus mobile?
Again, it comes back to scale, design, what you're looking to do. Ex-dairy, they are wonderful animals. That from a meat quality perspective, they are a lot harder to finish to something that has broad appeal, as opposed to there's a large subset of people that want to eat ethical meat, and that absolutely falls into it. We've processed, I think the largest we've processed was 1.1 tonne. We definitely don't like doing it because they're very, very big. But what's better between like a on-farm or micro abattoir and a mobile really comes down to your circumstances of what you're looking at doing, how many you're achieving, where you're doing the butchery. There's not a single answer for it.
Cool. How does your GM percent compare to, so gross margin percent compare to a standard fixed location model?
Those are the percentages that I put there were really industry averages from there. So it's not mobile versus micro or anything else. It's generally what each sector of the value chain is generally looking to extract from that process, and the GM is directly related to the labour requirements and the timeframes as well. So if you were getting down to comparing mobile versus micro, it really, there's a whole lot of other factors that come in that actually are going to really skew that number one way or the other. The scale, the throughput, the labour requirements, a whole lot of others. So I really put that up just to provide, I guess, a broad understanding of what sector is looking to achieve from their input and output costs.
Yep. All right. And we want to finish up very soon so we can just open it up to other general questions as well. If people have them. We've just got two more quick, well, one quick one is how long does the beef hang before breakdown?
Standard process, which they quarter the animals, needs between 5 and 7 days to reach maximum tenderization. We use a process called tender stretch, where we don't quarter the animal, we only halve it. And then the weight of the animal accelerates the tenderization process. So we only need to hang it for a minimum of 2 days to achieve the same as 7 days quartered. But through our standard processing and so forth, they'll hang for about 5 to 6 days, which is probably 4 days that we don't need to, but it's just the way that our processing and throughput goes.
Thanks. And Jeff from Southampton Homestead has said, just a question regards layout and knowledge sharing, understanding that the blueprints for Provenir and plans are proprietary. Given the need out here, have you considered a more liberal approach with any innovations you've developed with those looking to develop on-farm abattoirs? So that's a comment and a
question.
Did you want to answer that one or take that one offline?
I didn't hear a question in there.
Oh, the question was, have you considered a more liberal approach with any innovations you have developed with those looking to develop on-farm abattoirs?
We're a commercial company with shareholders and other investors from there. So yeah, we do look to protect the IP that we've developed as well. We like to share knowledge, but no, we don't put our blueprints up on the website.
Yep. And Luke, do you think the concept could work on a smaller scale? For example, a large trailer, not truck for transport, if a farm had their own on-farm butcher and had other small farms in the region who also supplied animals, where they could process animals on the other farms, then return the bodies to the on-farm butcher?
Depending on the size of the livestock, yes. So for sheep, and looking at a small scale of, say, 10 to 15 sheep a day, absolutely a trailer could be designed with that. One of the considerations is under 4696, the mobile abattoir has to have an amenities shower and toilet on the trailer itself. So there are some design restrictions that need to be considered on a quite a micro design, but you're never going to get a 700 kilo cow be able to be hung on a car mounted trailer. Is my opinion. People might prove me wrong. Like we said, we're just at the start of the emerging of this technology. But there's also other considerations that need to come into the design to be able to be licensed from there.
Thanks, Chris. All right. So thank you so much, Chris, for answering all that. And I'm going to, I guess, open it up a little bit more broadly now for the last 10 minutes, noting I am available to stay on longer. I won't be able to answer questions specifically to meat processing necessarily, but I can certainly take your questions and follow-up answers for them if you want to stay on. But I'm going to, we've got Chris, and we've also got Justin, who you heard from at the start. There's a lot of other people on the chat here with a wealth of knowledge. I'm wondering if you have a question, if you just want to unmute yourself and dive in. If we're needing to, we can do the hand up function as well. But for now, I'm just going to let people jump in if you have a broad question or something that's been burning that hasn't been covered.
I'm also hoping that people can speak because there's over 100 on the webinar, and can someone just unmute themselves and say something to make sure we can do that?
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Yes.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Hello.
Hello. Who have we got? If you could just introduce yourself.
My name's Mark. So I have a quick question around the Queensland thing. So you mentioned that you'd been trying to push into Queensland and you didn't see too much stopping you. What do you think might be holding that back? And what might we be able to do to help push that forward?
To move into Queensland would require additional units to be built. And then to determine the location that we were going to go into. So we've spoken to, I think it's Safe Food up in Queensland as well. And we've also spoken to some of the planning guys as well from there. So probably at the moment, the biggest thing that's stopping us, it would be money.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anyone else want to jump in? Thanks, Mark. While we're waiting, we've got another couple of little chats. Was the minimum head 20 per year for Chris? That was per
Yeah,
week.
so it's 20 per visit that we go. So if a farm turns off, they might have 10 or 12. Economically, it doesn't stack up for us to get the truck and staff and everybody else out there for that. So most of the farms that we work with produce more than that, and we will be there for a period of time, but we've been to multiple farms once a year for what they produce.
Great. And Carly's got a good question around what does the farmer make per kilogram carcass weight?
Now we're getting heavy into the financials of it. That's fine. So our pricing that we do is a negotiation with each farmer. What we use at the outset is we look at what the top of market price is for the category of the animal that we're processing, whether it's a cow, steer, heifer, whatever it is. And then we take off 5% of that because there's no transport costs, which is generally the component from there. And then we have a discussion with the farmer from that. So then they know that they're getting top of market, and generally the farmers that we work with can rightfully expect that they would be getting top of market or close to top of market. Conversation goes pretty quickly and easily most times.
Thank you.
How far in advance? Sorry, it's Kelly here from Southern Tas. How far in advance are you booked out in terms of capacity to take on new farmers?
We're booked out generally 3 to 5 months in advance. And we're rarely taking on new farms now because we've sort of established a relationship with a number of farmers that we sort of link in with their farming operations and process with those guys as well. So that's why we would love to produce more units so that we could work with more great farmers.
Gary Page has got his hand up.
Yeah, hi everyone. Hi Chris. Yeah, well, I'm an organic farmer in WA, and a lot of us can't get a custom kill done anymore. Have you got any penchant for setting up in WA, or do we look at a cooperative model? Like we're looking at all options now and doing our numbers on heads and stock varieties, etc., etc. But we had heard that there was some interest from you guys in coming to WA, but yeah, like Mike from Queensland, I suppose, will pose the question.
Yeah, it's kind of where we have been at the business side of things is how much can we realistically grow versus can we enable others to do what we've done as well. So, that's why, 3 years ago, we would have never built a unit for another client because we're like, no, this is our IP, we're going to grow it and so forth from there. But the opportunity that we believe exists at the moment is well beyond what we can realize as a company. And that was part of the reason as to why I was happy to do this webinar as well, is we would love to be able to build units for other groups to take on, and we'll share all our skill and knowledge and help them with financial modeling and so forth for others to actually do the same as what we've done. And if we're successful in that, we would like to think that there would be an academy or something like that of others that share their experience, and we can share opportunities for supply chain sales and so forth from there. So I'd love it if there was a group of farmers or a single farmer says bugger it, I'm going to do it myself, and take that step and move into it. And I'm 100% supportive of anyone who decides to go into this space, whether they do it in partnership with Provenir or they do it on their own.
We'd love to explore all that opportunity, Chris, because we're looking at all options here.
Right.
Yeah. So I'll be in touch.
Yeah,
Great.
and Gary, there is lots of options as well. So, we've got one option. We think it's worth considering, but there's, I would really recommend you to consider all and talk widely.
Thanks for that.
We've done that, Chris. We're ready to.
Great.
Yep. All right. Talk soon.
Okay, great. Thanks, Gary.
Thank you. Emma Kate, you got your hand up there.
I do. Hi, Chris. Thanks. Nice. Is that a Banksy triptych in the background there?
It's thank you. Yes, my partner bought it. It's an interpretation of a Banksy, but yeah, it disturbs some people and it makes other people inspired. So it's a nice talking piece.
I'll take the inspiration angle.
Yeah, me too.
So this is a question about the business model. I get, well, more about the financial model is how are your investors? Are they happy with where you're at? Have you returned any dividends yet in your to your shareholders? And how long do you see if someone was to start something, how long of a lead time would that be? Would you estimate that would be before a return on investment's made?
So there's about 4 questions in there, Emma Kate. So I'll work through them. We have an incredible shareholder group. They're incredibly patient. They all knew what we were doing was high risk, but they believed in the vision and they wanted to be a part of that as well. So we don't have shareholders storming down the ramp of the MPU. We've actually got a really great understanding. We've got a really broad shareholder base ranging from billionaires to small scale farmers who've put in $5,000. So no, we haven't returned any dividends yet. We've ploughed everything back into the growth of the business. Because there is a scale of economy which we are just starting to get to now with the unit. Without everyone would have had it difficult, but 2019 was a hell of a year to do a startup in a industry that had never been done before, trying to change laws, because as everyone knows, COVID hit 6 months after we started and actually hit the meat industry really hard with regards to labour and compliance and so forth. So yeah, short answer is no, we haven't provided any ROI on the shareholder dividends from there. We're hopeful in the next 12 to 18 months on the trajectory that we're on at the moment that will become a reality. For others going into it as well, the potential for a return on investment. I would not say that, if you want a really high return, high risk, put it into the stock market. But if you want to do something of purpose, which is financially rewarding, I think this is a good option. But you're not going to get returns within the first 3 years. That's a reality on it. But there's a lot of learning that we've done along the way, and anyone that we work with, we want to share that with them and build it for success. So it'll be a shorter runway than what we've had to do.
Thank you. And while you're talking there, we have Jen Robinson from Sprout Tasmania has shared the petition for Tasmanian small-scale meat processing. I've also shared the AFSA petition for small-scale livestock in Victoria, which has the endorsement or sponsorship of Martha Haylett in Parliament to make that legitimate. I've shared Chris's details. We will share all of this again in the follow-up email. We have another question. Any comments or insights on South Australian regulatory environment and whether there is any prospect of something similar being possible here? I understand there are barriers to mobile processing here, meeting all the current regulatory requirements for retailing. Yeah, I think that's with PIRSA.
Yeah, so we haven't actively looked in the South Australian space recently. It's probably be about 3 to 4 years old. They adopt AS 4696 like every other state, but the approval process seems to be one that is more personality based than process based, and a single individual, from what I understand in person, makes the decision on every application. And that application, I understand, is final. I know that Michelle Lally, who was definitely a pioneer in the mobile abattoir space, had a lot of challenges with the regulatory space over there. So it's a bit of a rambling non-answer, but we do think South Australia is one of the more difficult states to get this up and running.
And on that, the Food Embassy is in South Australia is doing a little bit of work into looking at the current barriers along with AFSA, Australian Food Sovereignty Alliance. If you'd like to get in touch with Liz from the Food Embassy, I can share her contact details as well or you can email me directly if I forget. I try not to. Also, just noting we've reached the end. I am happy to keep going, as I said. And if you want to, you're welcome to head off if needed, and that includes Chris, our wonderful presenter.
I'm happy to stay on if there's others that have waded through the last 2 hours and still have a question. I'm very happy to hang on and answer those questions.
Thanks, Chris. Well, I will just say before, if people are jumping off, just want to say thank you, a massive thank you for sharing such a comprehensive presentation and for taking the time to answer all these questions. So yeah, that's wonderful. We've still got 35 people here. So yeah, this is such a big issue. And as Justin alluded to in his introduction, really encouraging everybody to talk, find someone to talk to. If you don't have someone to talk to, that invitation was there to contact Justin himself or contact the Sustainable Table team. We can't obviously provide, we might be able to connect you up with someone, but we also wanted to just share that Lifeline is a really fantastic service run by volunteers, and it's an ear to talk to by trained counsellors. So we will just share that link as well, because we know how full on this issue is, and it's very real for many of you. Now, I don't have any hands up, but I'm just going to keep posting links in, which we'll share. But does anyone else have a question or want to jump in? Maybe Justin, I might get you to add any reflections or thoughts that might have come up for you.
Thanks, Jody, and Chris, thank you so much. I actually got a lot out of that, even though we've talked personally. I got a lot out of your presentation there. Thank you, and also the offer to help, with sharing knowledge and helping other people who are wanting to pursue options for themselves. You made a point that you're at capacity. That's it's a common problem that we have when there's an option available that it either, especially a good option, it fills up pretty quick. So there's this seems to be this investment vacuum in supporting rural and regional communities and being able to help get these solutions and getting other options available up and running. And the expectation is that farmers are, as you said, incredibly innovative and can come up with the solutions, but for a lot of people, they're just not able to sort of really string themselves out financially or take that leap. Therefore, finance and borrowings and other forms of financial support should be what we'd need to see coming into the space to underwrite the risk for others to take on options for themselves. I think there's some fantastic comments from a lot of people attending the webinar there. It was great to sort of catch up on the chat quickly more towards the end. There's a lot of people who are looking at all different breeds and how to process that. I know here in WA we've got groups of people who have worked together in order to have facilities operating. And with the fact that you're at capacity, and you've mentioned you'd like to be able to maybe produce units for others,
It's been a pleasure, guys. Thank you very much for inviting me. Great questions. And again, if anyone else has any other questions or comments, contact details are there. I'm available.